The 376 Steyr. Jeff Cooper's Dragoon. That's the cartridge we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, different guns, different cartridges, the right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast, all that stuff. I'm going to throw in a rapid-fire version of the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic, the 376 Steyr. Blessed to have served in the military, law enforcement, combat veteran, private contractor, competition shooter, lifelong hunter, guide. Blessed by God that He got me through all those things so I could share this firsthand training, knowledge, experience with you to serve you today. Let's dive into the podcast. Kind of a big, heavy version of a rifle, of a gun, something like that. You might call a Dragoon. The Scout rifle is kind of Jeff Cooper's envisionment. I'm sure he wasn't the only one, and I think he got the idea from African Scout for the Scout rifle, but it's kind of known as Jeff Cooper's thing. Well, he specified specifically the 308 for the Scout rifle, but a bigger version of the Scout rifle in 376 Steyr. So I'm going to call this Jeff Cooper's Dragoon, the 376 Steyr. Now, really can't talk about this without, one, talking about the Scout rifle, which I was actually out just practicing with the Scout rifle literally today. The thing literally rides around in the back seat of the truck. Ruger Scout rifle. But his kind of more involvement was with the Steyr Scout rifle. The Scout rifle concept we'll have to touch on. We'll also have to touch on the 375 H&H. We can't really talk about this properly without talking about that. The Scout rifle, and you'll get in all kinds of fights. There are people that just love the Scout rifle. It's the best thing since sliced bread. There's people that are on the other side and think that it's about as useful as a solid black rainbow. There's just all kinds of different opinions on the Scout rifle. But what is the Scout rifle? As my wife would put it, it's a rifle for scouts. It's not meant to be a main battlefield rifle. It's not meant to take the place of an assault rifle. It's not meant to be the world's best big game hunting rifle. It's meant to kind of live in this quasi-in-between world where you may have to use it for a tactical application. You may have to use it to put food on the table. Legal in a lot of places that a semi-auto would not be legal. And it has to have certain characteristics, which I'm not going to get into all those, but a lightweight, handy, made more for practical shooting positions and long-range precision. Good out to 300 yards, light and handy. There's some debate on the weight, whether it was 6.6 pounds or 7.7 pounds, but a fairly lightweight, handy rifle. Without getting into the optics, and there's a lot of other criteria. I'm trying to boil it down simply. I've done other episodes on the Scout rifle, and many other people that know more about Scout rifles in the history have done that than I have. I would encourage you to look up Steve Clifford if you want to look up more specific stuff on the Scout rifle. Obviously, look up Jeff Cooper and the original ideas for the Scout rifle. That said, the original specs were for the standard being the 308. There were some other cartridges named, like the 7mm 08, but the 308 specifically was named. Well, what if you liked this Scout rifle concept, but you wanted bigger game, not than the 308 is capable of? You could kill a blue whale with a 308 if you know what you're doing, but a little bit more capable on big and dangerous game. That's what we're talking about with this. And one of the kind of standard minimums for that, for dangerous and big African game, is the 375 H&H, the OG Magnum. The 375 H&H is a storied cartridge by which we get many of our modern Magnums of today. Old school, belted, beefy, manly Magnum, the 375 H&H. It's a great cartridge. It's known and world-renowned for being capable. It's kind of the minimum of, big capable cartridge. You can get up into like the 50 caliber stuff, but the 375, you could argue whether that one or the 9.3x62 is more or less powerful or whatever. But the 375 is known for kind of being the minimum, and in some places I think the legal minimum for some types of game. What if you want to use a scout rifle concept, specifically the Steyr scout rifle, which is a cool gun, the Steyr scout rifle concept, but you want to hunt bigger, heavier, dangerous game? That's where today's cartridge comes in, the 376 Steyr. Now, I am going to read from Cartridges of the World. It was a gift from a patron. Thanks, Pat, and I have it in front of me. Historical notes. Hornady and Steyr announced this chambering at the 2000 SHOT Show. Jeff Cooper has long heralded the scout rifle concept. Basically, this is a short, lightweight bolt-action rifle that is essentially designed to be equipped with a forward-mounted, compact, long eye relief scope of low magnification. Hence, the scout rifle is a package deal. Cooper wanted a chambering for this creation that would do in a pinch for stopping practically any game on Earth. The specific critter of his actual concern was Cape Buffalo, long noted for bad temper, tenacity, and terminal effective retaliation. Can I just pause right here and say, whoever wrote this has a good command of the English language. I don't even know who that is, but what a great use of wordage right there. Long noted for bad temper, tenacity, and terminal effective retaliation. Beautiful, beautiful wordsmithing there. From this backdrop grew the 376 Steyr, using bullets up to 300 grains and easily generating as much as 4,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. It would seem that the 376 Steyr would fulfill Jeff's wishes. I'm going to interject here. This is me. 4,000 foot-pounds of energy. Now, the 9mm, I am kind of comparing, but just for a rough idea, the 9mm is the defect. The 9mm is the go-to defensive cartridge of our day, depending on whether it's a standard loading or a plus P. You're looking at like the mid 300s to a hot load, breaking the 400 foot-pounds of energy. This cartridge, 4,000 foot-pounds of energy. To put that in perspective. And I actually didn't plan this. I just recorded an episode on the 284 Winchester, which I had no idea. But continuing on in general comments, this case, while an essentially new design, shares characteristics with several earlier numbers. Base diameter of 0.500 inch is just about the same as the 284 Winchester. Nominally 0.496 inch. Or the 9.3x64 Bernecki. I'm going to skip some of this stuff here. I'm not reading verbatim. It's not the Bible. I think I can skip around and not give you all the stuff in context. .376 Steyr case to produce cartridges appropriate to both 2.8 inch and 3.2 inch actions in every feasible bore size from 6mm to 41 caliber. The 376 Steyr drew a moderate amount of attention when it was introduced. This was probably due to the fact that it was available in the Steyr Scout rifle. However, the cartridge has failed to catch on, very likely because no American firearm manufacturer offers rifles chambered for the cartridge. Some also predicted the case would become the basis for a wide range of Wildcat cartridges. These, if any at all, have been created are getting no attention. However, it could be argued that the .30 Remington AR is loosely based on the 376 Steyr case. RAM. And actually, that's another really great cartridge that didn't catch on, is the .30 AR. Anyway, the 376 Steyr. It's a cool cartridge. It's a sledgehammer cartridge. Does it kind of meet the 375 H&H, at least on paper? I mean, obviously, as far as popularity and street cred and stuff, it does not. But let's look at some numbers. The loadings, your numbers may vary, listed in Cartridges of the World. Let's say 225 grain Hornady at 2560. it lists a 300 grain Swift at 2560, which is kind of odd because it's a lot heavier bullet. Anyway, I'm just giving you the numbers here. Let's look at that 300 grain. There's several loadings for the 300 H&H. Has been around a lot longer, but those list 2500 and 2600 and 2530. So that lists at 2560. So the 375 H&H does have one loading at 2600, but I mean you're kind of splitting hairs there. It's pretty close. It's pretty close to the 375 H&H. I believe quite a bit shorter. So, you know, if you were looking for a pretty cool Wildcat to rechamber for and you want a Dragoon, I like the Scout Rifle. I like the Steyr Scout Rifle, although I prefer the Ruger Scout Rifle because it's controlled around feed. I don't know that I would... There's a such thing as like a Goldilocks power to weight ratio. This is one of the reasons I don't like the 40 caliber Glock. Just the power to weight ratio is all garbage. I can't imagine what the 376 Steyr is like in a lightweight Scout Rifle. However, if I were getting something in the 375 H&H range, I'd probably want a rifle to weigh, without it being too much to carry, normally like a rifle between 5 and 7 pounds. I would like something 375 H&H between like 8 and 10 pounds at least. So if you were looking to get a gun rechambered for a big heavy hitting cartridge and you didn't have the Magnum action to hold the 375 H&H, you had a fatter action that would chamber the 376 Steyr, that would be kind of cool. Or if you do want to try out the Jeff Cooper Dragoon, right? If you want to try that out, if you want to go to Africa and hunt, you know, buffalo with the Scout Rifle and 376 Steyr, they're out there. I don't know if they're still being produced. I can't imagine there's a lot of demand for them, though, so you might be able to find one if you want one. The 376 Steyr. It's not an old cartridge, introduced in 2000, but a pretty cool cartridge, and I thought worth doing an episode on the 376 Steyr just because of the history and the Scout Rifle and Jeff Cooper, and it's pretty cool. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you enjoyed learning about the 376 Steyr. If you don't know, you probably should do your research on the 375 H&H just because it is so storied and there's so many other cartridges kind of based on it. A lot of the Magnums, at least until recently, were based on the 375 H&H. Very capable and a good cartridge. Also, if you're looking at this one that's similar, shorter, designed for a standard action, you may look at the 375 Ruger. 375 Ruger is a much, not crazy popular, but much more popular than the 376 Steyr. So you might look at that also. Anyway, with that, guys, I appreciate you listening. Tactical tip of the day: socks. Probably not going to be a shocker that sometimes you lose a sock and you have one random sock that doesn't match any other socks. Some things you can do with this. You might think we were so high speed in Iraq we had the best gear as Marines, but to that I would say you've probably never been a Marine. Marines know that you don't always get the best gear. I was one of the early people that got an ACOG. I went to war my first time with the M16A2 with iron sights. When the invasion began, I joined pre-9/11. When the war began, our first tour, we had iron sights. I was one of the very first people to get, I don't know about in the world, but like in the Marine Corps that I saw, an ACOG, Advanced Combat Optical Gun Sight. You'd think we got some kind of super high-speed case or something. We did not. What I did, because a good Marine knows how to sew, I took a sock, I cut a hole in the bottom, I probably sewed up the back of it, and I slipped that over the scope as a scope cover. If you want a good poor man's scope cover to keep dust and debris and stuff off your scope, depending on the sock that's applicable to the size of your scope, you can make a pretty cheap scope cover, and when you go to shoulder the rifle, you can just grab it and throw it off. And if you lose it, who cares? It's a sock. So there's your tactical sock tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. From the book of Job, would you indeed annul my judgment? Would you condemn me that you may be justified? Have you an arm like God, or can you thunder with a voice like his? It reminds me of another verse. Who are you, O man, to answer back to God? I think a lot of people, although they wouldn't come out and say it in black and white in today's culture and society, God says one thing, but they're like, I know that's what God says, but I don't like it, so I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to answer back to God and say, this thing that you say is an abomination, that is horrible, I think it's okay, I'm going to do it anyway. Would you annul God's judgment? Would you try to make what he says void to please you? That's not going to turn out too well at the end of an age. Every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. We will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Don't try and make void what God says because you don't like it. It is true if God says it, whether you like it or not. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.